Hi, welcome to the Career Corner. My name is Heather Swift, and I'm delighted to be your host. The purpose of the Career Corner is to help people move from career distress to career success. Today, we will be talking about talent acquisition innovation and personal branding in a post-COVID era with my special guest, Joe Wilde. Joe is the CEO of Video Brand Building, which specializes in creation of personal brand videos. They are short, compelling videos that entice a viewer to engage. Joe is also a talent expert with more than 15 years of recruiting and talent acquisition experience in some of the world's largest organizations. We're talking JP Morgan, Bridgewater, Associates, IBM, just to name a few. He's a man of many talents. And I'm so happy to have you on the show, Joe. Welcome.
Heather, thank you very much. Always blessed to be in your presence. Obviously going back, networking, 10 plus years ago. So thank you very much for having me on your show.
Oh my gosh. Well, you just have so many great things to share that I think we can really make an impact for both job seekers and hopefully people that are wanting to bring in talent too, sharing some of those trends. So you have such great experiences of connecting talent to companies. When COVID hit and even coming out of it, what was the good news and bad news for the job seeker, that people that were applying to get into jobs? Can you talk from the candidate perspective for a couple minutes?
It's actually a very interesting journey because if we were to look back, a year ago, everyone thought COVID was just going to be some temporary situation. Yes. And what you started to notice is that the candidate experience and the candidate journey really started to change. You started to see candidates who were interviewing much quicker, right? Because you're at home, you don't have to go in and take a day off for an interview, right? Which then also meant that so many more people were out just exploring and having informal conversations, but for companies, they took it as an interview. So what was so interesting is the candidate journey really did change, and you started to see companies were hiring so much quicker. Candidates were going through and interviewing for multiple positions, and they actually had options. So candidate was definitely king. So in this case, now we're starting to transition, and we're starting to now look back and say, okay, well, what can we learn actually from history? So now we're starting to look at what happened from 2008 to 2013 in our economy, and how can we learn from those experiences to now start to set forth a talent acquisition strategy going post-COVID.
So talk a little more about that from the company perspective. Talent acquisition strategy, meaning what more you should use when finding your candidates, or what is your perspective on that?
I think it's all the above. I mean, companies are no longer just focused on, are we hiring the talent? It's now about branding and awareness. So people know about our organization and what we do, and what's the way that one interprets that company. So now you have that impression standpoint, right? So, if you think about the Netflix show, The Social Dilemma, right? It started to show really how people thought, right? And how you can start to trigger someone to respond. So I think now companies are starting to see that it's not just about hiring, it's about the impressions, it's about the awareness, it's around what's our culture look like, and how have we really adapted to situations to provide our employer or our employees the best pretty much work-life balance so that you're the employer of choice.
Well, also too, now we have Glassdoor. When you started working, we did not have Glassdoor. LinkedIn was just coming on the scene. So with Glassdoor, like, everyone has a voice, right? And people are looking at, is this a company I would actually want to work for? So I want to ask you, if I'm a candidate, and at RiseSmart, right, we're virtual from the get-go. So we've been helping people in transition be prepared for video interviews for years now. This is not new for us. It's not new for anyone who's been in our care. But there's a lot of companies that we're still trying old school methods, right, of recruiting. The regular phone call, come into the office, whatnot, all of that froze. So now you have a lot of people who maybe have never been exposed to having to do a video interview. So do you have any funny stories about interviewing someone with like background or anything crazy happening? Or
well,
any
I think you bring up some great points, right? Because
I want a good story, Joe. Tell me a good story.
All right. Well, in this case, some people don't understand their surroundings and also don't realize that this is a professional conversation.
Yes.
So, I've had situations in the past where you'd be having a video conversation and the child of the, of the person you were interviewing were coming over to their parent to ask them a general question, right?
Yes.
Well, a year ago, that was frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
Today, totally acceptable.
Yeah, you have the
right?
cat tail going across the camera.
Hey, listen, it doesn't matter, right? So it's the fact that video interviewing or video in itself, right? That's just the future. Actually, it is now, right? So we have to realize that people are blending their work and their life together, and this is part of their brand, right? And we have to, as an employer, look at that and say, that's who they are, right? We appreciate that, right?
But how forgiving though is corporate America with that? Because I still have to say, it is your brand. Like, this is my actual home office. You can tell I love the color aqua. Okay, this is no fake setup here. But kids coming in, it's an adult being kind to their children, or the pet barking. That's one thing. But having a crazy background with just boxes of stuff piled, like, I still feel like, I know when we're coaching people, we're like, be aware of your background as part of your brand. So can you give any tips around some do's and don'ts that could be deal breakers for the perspective, like not the child or the sweet things that can happen?
I would say this,
right?
Go into it as if you're going into their office, right? What would you expect? You would expect great lighting. You would expect a clean office space, a nice chair, a glass of water, right? So get yourself in the mental frame that you are actually going into a location for an interview, right?
It just happens to be from home.
And it happens to be from home. But think about this, we're all working from home.
Yeah.
Right? I go through a regimen to get myself mentally prepared to go into work, right? You probably do as well. Just like candidates need to get themselves mentally prepared for an interview, right? It's okay, is it, what pants? Are you wearing pants or not, right? That was always the joke.
I often feel more prepared with pants personally,
yes,
but I realize not everyone may feel that way.
Exactly. So it's the fact that get yourself mentally prepared, right? Because since we've had this change in this candidate experience, how are things going to change now over the next 6 to 12 months where companies might be asking their employees to return?
Yeah.
Which then now means that you aren't going to have the flexibility to go and interview as much as you had wanted to, right? So now all of a sudden, if you are interested in jobs, you're only going to interview for the jobs you are truly interested in. And then next, you're going to actually have to make the time commitment. So it's
right,
no longer,
especially if you're currently working. You're talking if I'm
correct.
currently working, right? And then doing that. So let's pause for one moment. So mental preparedness. How would you recommend a candidate get into that spot? What are some tricks of the trade? Just because our mind is either, what's that saying? Our mind is a lousy boss, but a great employee, or, there's something like we want to be the masters of our mind, not vice versa. But this past year, we've all struggled with the mental, the Groundhog Day, and just the stress, and just, this is so different of a life that we can't hug people and go travel. So if you're looking at an employee who's going through all the shocks that we've gone through of COVID, what can they do to get into that right space, that right mental state, to really put their best foot forward for an interview, Joe?
One, it's all about preparation. So I even go back in terms of when you were in school. How did you make sure that you wrote an effective senior thesis, right? You did research, you maybe did a few drafts, right? You had other people look at it, and then ultimately you came up with your final product, and then you submitted it, right? Same thing here. You do your homework, you go and look on LinkedIn, not just go on LinkedIn, but actually go out and reach out and connect with people, so have a great compelling story as why you want to connect with them, have a nice video resume or a personal branding video that can start to market your background to be able to learn more about what's going on, right? On top of that, it's making sure that you understand the missions and what this company or organization is all about, right? It's not just about the dollars and cents. It's what are you doing in your community, right? How are you looking at not just talent acquisition, but succession planning? So do some of that research. And that ultimately could be through people, could be through technology, right? But then when it actually gets to moving forward with those interviews and those conversations, that's where I think the mental preparation changes, right? So one, I still think about what we used to do back in the day. We used to put our favorite song on and listen to it before you went into your interview. Get yourself mentally prepared, get yourself, jacked up, right?
Talking about a peak state, right?
Exactly. Get to that peak state, get yourself mentally prepared so people can see who you are, right? Your passions and interests. Yeah. And actually what it does, it helps to decompress you to really focus on what matters.
So question for you. So since you are someone who's done a lot of recruiting, you've had those first or second interview rounds where you've been interviewing the candidate, right? So what are some of the hardest questions that you ask candidates?
So my colleagues used to tell me that
not to put you on the spot.
No, I will tell you the top questions I ask every candidate, right? Because it reads deeper into your ability and skill. It actually reaches deep into your value system, right?
Oh, good. Tell us.
So I hire based off of what's called a VAS, the value, ability, and skill. So in that, one question I ask every candidate, if I were to give you a blank sheet of paper and a pencil, because you're going to need the eraser, right? And you had to write down that ideal job description with roles, responsibilities, what would be on that sheet of paper, right? And in that, it's not always about your answer, right? One, do you know how to play a political response or an answer, right? Did you read the job? But in that case, right, I get to start to see, how does someone think? And that goes into your value system, right? Are you a forward thinker? Have you been planning, right? Have you actually thought about your career, right? So that's one question.
The job they're interviewing for, do they have an
Correct.
understanding?
Exactly. So that's playing the political game. Do you know what to say to the right
people? Do you
people?
know why you're here?
Exactly. But then that's where you get to see who's actually interested and who's just applying to a job versus wanting to make a career at your organization, right?
Yeah.
The next question I always ask people is, tell me your top 3 core areas of expertise and provide as much depth and scope as you can, right? Because at the end of the day, when you look at a job description, it's full of information, all right? Yes. The recruiter wants to know 3 or 4 key things. And then the last question, this all talks about humility and your ego. I want to know about your biggest failure.
Ooh, so you say, tell me about your biggest failure? Tell
me your biggest failure, why it happened, right? What did you learn about yourself? What did you do differently, right? So this is now the, again, value part. Woo. Are you really looking at yourself to say, look, I might have made a mistake? Because if you sit there and say, I haven't made a mistake, then unfortunately, this isn't the right place for you because we all make mistakes, right?
Oh my God. I love it. Those are really hardcore. So we're going to have to pause here in a moment for a commercial break, but so we'll pick up where we left off with those, but those are 3 great questions to contemplate. And I've never heard those before in that way. So thank you for sharing those. And we'll be right back with more of Joe Wilde after this brief break.
It's an onion.
Hi, welcome back to the Career Corner with my special guest, Joe Wilde. So Joe, let's talk a little bit more about the candidate, today's job seeker. What can they expect moving further into 2021?
Things are definitely looking up, right? So recently unemployment numbers came out and we're at 4.5%. The Fed came out and said that job growth for this coming year is going to be at a fastest pace than in the last 4, when we think about it, 4 decades. So, 40 plus years. When we start thinking about it overall, they're looking at the future, the next 6 months, as literally the rosiest time frame that we've had since literally COVID started. So companies are going to be hiring for sure. You see the vaccine is coming out. That means the economy opens up. When the economy opens up, jobs, and that's job creation.
Finally, yeah.
So I think it's one great horizon, right? Great horizon. But I think now it's more of, how are you preparing yourself if you are either a company or a job seeker, right? Because the way that people are going to find jobs now is drastically different. The way you're networking is drastically different. So
say more about that. Drastically how? How different?
Yeah, so we went from this whole text-based, here you go, you have a job description, here I have a resume, and it's really going into video form. So at Video Brand Building, what we actually do is we'll take your resume that you submitted, that ultimately a recruiter or a hiring manager couldn't differentiate you from someone else, and we take that and tell your story and put it in video form, right? So when we start to think about even connecting with someone on LinkedIn, rather than just sending a general introduction, now you can actually attach the link to your video resume / personal branding video, which now, when you think about it overall, we're going to look at it as effective versus efficient, right? You can now get your brand and your message out to so many more people quicker. And the people who are going to respond to you to actually want to talk are people of value that will produce a result.
Do you think by having a video resume, can I call it video resume? Is that kind of what we're calling it?
You can call it a video resume. I also look at it as a personal branding video. It's kind of like thinking about a trailer to a movie, right?
Yeah. Okay. So if I had my movie trailer and I'm pushing that out, I would think too, there's an element of chemistry and more of the personality comes through than just any piece of paper, because you can't hear the voice, you can really come through in a more three-dimensional way. Am I saying that correctly? Would you agree with that?
Exactly. I mean, what we're doing is we're creating a video based off of your expertise, your background. I mentioned prior around your VAS, your values, abilities, and skills. So what we do is we partner with that job seeker to create a script that tells their story, right? From there, they would conduct a voiceover and be able to articulate their story in their own words. And then we take all of that information to create the story, right? So when we think about how we learn, how we understand, right? It's through video. I mean, think about how you get trained. It's through video.
People love stories too.
It's unbelievable, because when we think about this overall, people will retain information 95% more using video than someone reading something text-based, right? So, data just kind of shows that not only is video here, it's here to stay. And I think the other interesting component of looking at video resumes and video job descriptions are, who are the hiring managers now and in the near future, right? Those are millennials, individuals who grew up using technology, watching video, right? So in that case, what we're now doing is, as candidates, is we are now putting ourselves in the shoes of the people who want to receive our information. So we're just have to
That's a good pivot. That's a good pivot, Joe. Of really, it's not just about who you are as a job seeker, it's who's looking at you.
Well, think about your resume. Your resume is about you, but it's not for you, right? So same thing. The thing that's a little interesting is the personal branding video is really about you. And this is the value that I can bring to your organization. This is what you are paying for when you hire me, right? But now this is in my own words. You get to even hear little things like what people do in their free time, right? From being able to mentor for the Boy Scouts of America, or that they are roast beef aficionados, right? You start to find out little things that make you literally connect with someone.
And really come to life, right?
It all comes to life.
Yeah. How long do you recommend a video like that be?
So I really think it depends on what value you think you can add. It's the same question as how long should your resume be, right? It's as much of the information that is adding value to your end user. But the way I've really started to look at this is, if you're probably under 5 to 7 years of experience, your video is going to be under a minute long.
Wow.
And then
and you can still have impact under 60 seconds.
And that's the beauty of a video, is that let's just say hypothetically you have worked with major league sports franchises, right? Well, in that case, we can just say that you worked within professional sports, and on the visual are all the different franchises you've worked with. Now, the interesting thing is you're going to retain multiple of those franchises because of the visual, not so much the word. So because of the word picture correlation, you will then retain more information.
Okay, gotcha.
It's
Yeah,
just
so it's really,
it's a psychological
both,
approach.
right? It's using both the words, but you're seeing the pictures. Because I saw yours, and yours was really cool. I loved it. It was very clever, and it made me be even more interested in you as a person, which I've thought you to be interesting for years now. So, but I loved it. It was really.
I'm
clever.
just wild. What can I tell you?
You are
right?
taking a walk on the wild side here,
That's
Joe.
right. No, but I think overall, when we just look at the future of how you brand yourself, you look at the innovation that's occurring. It's not just within talent acquisition, right? This is across the board. And now that, if we were to look at LinkedIn as an example, LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft, right? That's a marketing, and it's turned into a marketing and sales engine. So now we as users have to now understand, how can we use this marketing and sales engine to market and sell ourselves, right? So I think this is just where our minds have to, change a little bit. I guess I remember the phrase, if you change the way you think, the ways you think change.
That's a good one.
So, but, I think overall, when we start to look at, the job market, I think it's also going to be based off of sector growth, right? Obviously, pharma life sciences is growing at an unbelievable clip.
Yeah.
We understand that. So when we start thinking about the branding and the networking and growth opportunities in industries and sectors, it's what can you leverage to network effectively with people in those sectors? Because I will tell you that personalities are drastically different, and the approach has to be different.
Okay. In what way? Like how do you, I guess through research, right? Or really, I always find interviewing people that have worked in those fields or those verticals, getting a flavor for the culture, because some are a lot more buttoned up and serious. Some are more like, hey, it's all casual. Like they're wearing hoodies for like 5 years now, so you got to know where you're going and how to interview, I think, right? To show up. But also know to my own self be true. You want to make sure you're putting yourself in something where there is going to be that chemistry and that good fit, not just fake it till you make it, I think.
Correct. But I think what's the unknown, right? This is the unknown, is what's the future culture of companies? That's the question, because for the last year, there's been no culture. The culture has been the four walls of your own home. Right.
Well, I would push back on that, because I think it depends on how steep people are in the culture, because we're a virtual organization. And
very true. That's a very valid point.
So I have to push back on you, my friend.
I think that's a very valid point, because I think it depends on the maturity of the organization and being able to adapt and adopt to those things. So thank you for pointing that out. You're always great at that.
We've had a lot of practice, right?
Exactly. But I think that's the unknown, is what's the corporate culture look like, right?
Yeah, and how do you keep it when more people are working from home? Because your point is valid in that way, where if you're used to everyone having cocktails on a Wednesday and birthday cake in the office, and now and we've all felt isolated, because I can't go visit my customers and my prospects, my friends, my colleagues. Like, so even though I work from home, typically I still have been very isolated also. So, but I loved working my 20s in the office, and in my 30s, like it was so much fun. And that's when you're learning about office politics, and you're making friends in person, and there's
having true, and it's interesting, we're doing this over Zoom, and we used to meet up over near, Grand Central all
Yes,
the time
yes.
and
Oh
have
my goodness.
networking events and have
Yeah.
50, 100 people in a room and connecting with one another, right?
Yeah.
So this is where, again, that's shifted because now we don't know what that's going to look like. But then that's where it kind of goes back to saying, okay, having that video, that personal brand document that you can now look at from an effectiveness and an efficiency perspective and literally network with so many people so quickly, right? Because now they know
The
your
speed
story.
is there. The speed is there.
Speed.
The connection is different though. The handshake and all those, because I used to go to for New York Cares, I would do mentoring for like high school kids every year for like 8+ years about summer jobs and just starting to think about like what's the best of them and where's their interest and what are their innate gifts that they're truly born with and how to capitalize on those. And I loved it because they would just stare at me like I knew so much, right? And but the handshake, I go around and shake everyone's hand, like, no, you're not going to break me, like, give me some muscle here. And the basics, eye contact, like all those old school, things. And now it's look at the camera and watch your background. And, but I really hope that the younger generations that are being hired in companies when they've never met their boss in person, they've never met their colleagues, that we can shift to having the best of both worlds. That's what I hope for everybody anyway.
Yeah. And this is where, when we look at even someone like yourself who is helping to set those strategies and set forth future culture, right? That's where you play such a huge role, right? I look at it from our end in talent acquisition and being able to work with our leaders in terms of, how do you want to project your business, project your organization, your culture, right? So I think this is where, again, we kind of go back to who we were, right? And saying, like, we want that, skin to skin. We want to shake hands. We want to be able to have camaraderie, functions, after work to really get to know your team, right? So at the end of the day, you stay at your job or leave your job based off of the people you work with, right? You take the teacher, not the class.
Factor. Yes, sir. Absolutely. That is.
So
we are starting to slowly wind down here, but I love so much about the idea of the video branding coming out. If people want to learn more about you, where can they do that? What's your website?
Sure. First of all, more than open, send me an email, joe.wilde, WILDE at videobrandbuilding.com, or you can go to www.videobrandbuilding.com to learn more about not only what we do, but how we can put you in the spotlight. And you're able to see some examples. We're working with some great organizations right now to highlight who they are and their culture, but then also individuals around their brand and the value that they can add. In addition, I'm always open. LinkedIn is the way, right? But obviously, last point is always give me a call. All my contact information is on the website as well.
That's great, because you never sleep. So that's fabulous. So Joe, thank you so much for sharing those top 3 questions. I think those are going to be very popular, and for all of your wonderful words of wisdom. I appreciate you being on this evening.
Heather, thanks as always for having me, and thanks for teaching me something today too, right? We're all adult learners, right? We're all trying to understand the future. So always appreciate that collaboration.
Always. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. And thank you all of you for who viewed our wonderful segment today. I wish you much career success until we meet again.